I'm in rainy Hong Kong, and if you want, just use the chat or just turn on your mic and video and let us know where you're coming from. So Vicky, where are you now?
I'm in my home in Quezon City. It's not so sunny here. It looks like it will rain also in a few minutes.
It's probably the same as me here. I think we're going through typhoon season soon.
Yeah.
Great. And Chris, what about yourself? Where are you?
I'm located in Munich.
So it must be very early for you then.
Well, it's 10 o'clock in the morning. That's fine.
Okay. So welcome everyone as you join our session. Very excited for us to get started very soon. We'd love to know who you are. So please feel free to type into the chat your name, where you're based, and just a quick hi to everyone. So typically Perima we always do our dynamic huddles every single week on Mondays at 4 p.m. GMT 8. What we usually do this on Zoom. However, given we understand some of the limitations and constraints of using Zoom in certain industries, we are trying out Microsoft Teams today and hope it will go well. Spoken as part of this dynamic huddle, in these dynamic times when we're trying different things, we are glad that you and our audience and our risk managers in our community are also adapting and being quite agile with us and exploring new links with us each time. So thank you very much for joining our session. We'll start very soon. This session will be recorded, so no worries if you are if you've missed the beginning or if you are leaving halfway. We will be sending any slides out, and please feel free to make use of the chat function as much as possible, because we love questions, and this is really a session for risk managers to really get to know more about what we're trying to achieve here, and make sure that this session is relevant to you. If you're not speaking, please be on mute. We'll start off very shortly on understanding how Allianz integrates ESG into its business with a focus on the P&C side. So we're very happy to start off the session or to have today, a session that's being collaborated with Allianz and Perima, especially talking about ESG into our portfolios and services. Very, very proud to have Victoria Tan from Ayala Corporation. She's the head and of the group risk management and sustainability unit there, and one of the sustainable superwoman that was just nominated last year. So as well as a Perima board member representing the ambassador of Philippines. Joining us as well to talk about the ESG side is also Christopher from Allianz. He's the head of the ESG business services there. And so it's really interesting to understand how they partner up with corporations to help identify and mitigate ESG risk. So I'm not going to let this drag on anymore. So Vicky, anytime you're ready, please get started. You're on mute, Vic.
Thank you for that. Okay. Thank you, Stacy, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our dynamic huddle session for today. As mentioned by Stacy, we have today Chris Bonnet, head of ESG business services at Allianz. You may be wondering why ESG risks are important to companies, lenders, investors, and insurers alike. And I think that is one of the reasons why you have decided to join the session. Just to share my personal experience, I was surprised to receive an ESG rating report for Ayala Corporation from Allianz last year. And it made me reflect the connection of ESG to our insurance requirements. And it actually makes sense. In Ayala, we have been integrating risk management, sustainability, and governance since 2018. Managing ESG makes a company responsible, accountable, and transparent. And from there, I think it will help a lot when we communicate why do we need those insurance requirements. And before I get carried away, let me turn you now over to Chris, who will help us understand and go through on how we can integrate ESG into our operations. Chris, whenever you are ready, over to you now.
Sure. Thank you, Vicky. I think I need to be a presenter to put up slides. Yes, here it is. And you should be able to see the slides now. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thanks for the introduction, and thanks for hosting me today in this format. So good afternoon to Asia. As already announced, I'm Chris Bonnet. I'm head of ESG Business Services within AGCS, within Allianz. Within the global carrier for corporate and specialty risks. The ESG Business Service function is now 6 years old and is all about integrating ESG into our portfolios and this. The agenda for today is I'll talk a bit about ESG at Allianz in general. Then we will look into how ESG is integrated into the Allianz risk management. And as mentioned by Stacey in the beginning, it's more or less about the P&C side, the focus today, for obvious reasons. We'll try to make that also very tangible by going into a case study. So looking into 2 hydro dams, and the last bit will be on the ESG as a value proposition. So here we look at how we really use ESG also as a service for internal and external clients, and of course then go into the Q&A. So first of all, ESG at Allianz, I think a couple of remarks to our strategy as such. We've basically built our ESG strategy around 3 pillars: social inclusion, low carbon economy, and business integration. So we started off, I think, almost 20 years ago with social inclusion. And this was really about social action, corporate giving, and is now, for a large part today, our Encouraging Future Generations program. We're partnering with SOS Children Villages, and there's more around that. So this is the oldest program, I would say, and also resembles very much, let's say, corporate philanthropy and let's say traditional corporate social responsibility programs that you find. The second pillar is about the low carbon economy. So this is really how we manage climate risks or risks arising from climate change as an investor and an insurer, and promoting the transition to a low carbon economy. So this means how do we deal with the effects of climate change, but also how do we manage our effect on the climate as an insurer with our various activities. I would say one of the, let's say, relatively young building stones of our strategy is business integration. Young in the sense that it, I would say, got more structured around 7 years ago. Our department was also formed based on this business integration part. So 6 years old, a bit younger. And here it's really about managing material ESG risks and also seizing ESG opportunities. So really managing our portfolios. So we are responsible for the P&C side, but there's also other departments, similar departments, which, for example, work with asset management, which work with investment management internally, and really, let's say, colleagues and experts working on various parts of our business when it comes to portfolio integration. That's really crucial here. Vicky already mentioned in the beginning the importance also of ratings. Also for us as a big insurer, of course, it's not only financial ratings that matter. We are a well-rated and I think also quite leading company worldwide when it comes to different ratings, sustainability-related ratings, and I would say it shouldn't be the kind of target to achieve good ratings, but it should be a side effect of what you're doing. So it's the external recognition that you are on the right path forward. That's how we try to see that. So for example, so when you look at carbon project, because you say there's many requirements here and there, I think I'm not one-to-one matching what you're doing, what we believe is right. If we would that we would maybe have a B or an E rating, but for us, really, it is about in the end the effect and doing the right thing. Some ratings are not leading, but are an outcome or should be a related or good outcome of your efforts. Going into our risk management, I think first clarifying ESG, because not everybody might be actually accustomed to the term. It's an abbreviation for, let's say, sustainability management that's often used in the financial sector. I've predominantly came across that in the financial sector. I've also seen it in other sectors, but it is an operationalization of the term, which basically means it is about environmental, social, and governance topics. So environmental topics such as pollution, water quality, social topics just as health and safety, human rights, governance topics such as bribery and corruption. These are all clustered and let's say within these three buckets, and should inform our company's decision and should also help our clients to grow a sustainable business, so to say, also financial. Because in the end, this is about risks, and you see also the quote from our CEO here, and this is just really about how do we get resilience. I think that's a very important term in this respect. How do we get resilience? How do we get kind of a long-term horizon for management, and how do we also get the most out of opportunity management? Here, I think ESG can help and can go into the details later. So how do we manage that in practice? I think we have three main buckets. One is investment, one is insurance, and one is our own operations. And what really, I would say, is a commonality within these three different areas is that we integrated it in risk management processes. So it's part of our governance, it's part of our policy setup. And therefore taken with the same, let's say, with the same importance or the same attention as other parts of our risk management. It's very crucial to have ESG data and intelligence. Here we partner with major data providers to get the right insights for us internally, but also externally. Expert analysis, so having the right experts for the business, for operations, on board to help us work on that. And last but not least, dialogue with clients. So even if you look at our risk management processes, it's often about talking to companies, understanding how they manage their risk, they perceive risks, which helps us a great deal. In the end, it's all about identifying, managing, and in the end, using ESG risks internally. That's really where this is all focused at. How do we, as a department, how does the practice?
Just before you are going on, I think your microphone is breaking up a little bit, so we really can't hear you very well.
Okay.
Kind of on off again, maybe that might be better. And as kind of a fill-in for that, while you're doing that, maybe we can ask Vic a couple of questions as well, so we can also get a flavor of Vic's input and perspective too. Is that all right?
Sure.
Great. Okay. So, Steve or Vic, is there any kind of inputs that you can have to this topic while we wait for Chris to join us again?
Vicky, I wanted to ask you a question, actually, if it's okay.
Yeah,
Vicky,
it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I was interested, Chris was talking about Allianz started this journey 20 years ago, and started very much with the social dynamic and how that interacted with their business. And then it's grown and grown from there. I wondered if you could explain a little bit about the Ayala journey of how you got into this, because I know you're...
Yeah. Steve, I think I know what is your question, Steve. I don't hear anything from you now, but let me tell you about the Ayala journey. So I think just like any other corporation, and I think Chris mentioned this earlier, that everything started off like a philanthropic cause. It's like a philanthropic activities. We want to help the community. And then and if you are familiar with what do you call this, CSR, the corporate social responsibility, wherein some amount of money is given to a department to come up with a program or a project that will be for the good of the community, and that's CSR. But in that we have gone through all those stages, but in the end, my principal said that we are not doing a lot. That is very insignificant reach. So why not we do a framework, or let's borrow something else, a framework wherein we can have significant reach. And there, so we come up with the CSB framework. I think you are familiar with that. That is a CSB framework from Harvard. And that is actually creating shared value. That means you are looking into the gaps into your society, in the society, where are the things that needs to be funded or to be improved. So looking into the societal gap within your capacity and your capability, you have to come up with an innovative solutions and make that solutions scalable and make a financial model out of it. And there, it should always be scalable, and it should always be financially viable. Otherwise, that is not sustainable. So for us, sustainability is equivalent to our business model, wherein we look into the gaps, whether it is a sector gap or a gap in the processes, in the customer's requirement, and then we make a business model out of it. It is not about us, it is about the stakeholders that we serve. What can we do to help them out? What can we do to make their life easier? But again, the equation here will always in the equation we should always include financial viability, because if there is no financial viability, it will go back as like a CSR or like a philanthropic cause. It is not. For us, sustainability is a business model. And we have to embed that in all the facets of the organizations and of the operations. Otherwise, it is really, you will not achieve sustainability. Going back to Chris, I think he mentioned that in their journey, they started off into a social inclusion. And then I think it's now low carbon economy, or the effect of the effect of climate change into your business, and what is your effect actually on climate change, and that is related to your GHG emissions. We are all polluters, we have to admit that. If we are using electricity, we are increasing or putting something in the GHG equation. And then, and I think the last journey where they are, or the next journey in Allianz, is that there is that business integration, that they are looking into ESG risk. And what I like about what he said is that there is risk and opportunities. And in reality, that is also the Chinese way of yin yang. I think Stacy can relate to this. There is always that side of opportunity and risk. And the main idea is how do you balance it? Because there is forces between these two. And if you can balance it, that is the perfect situation for all of us. I think that helped answer the questions.
Yes, it certainly did,
Brilliant.
Vicky. I
Thanks,
mean,
Vicky.
it's always great hearing how risk and sustainability is also, increasingly, pushed together. And I think it's definitely a part of risk managers' kind of, remit to also look into this more carefully. And you've actually been a very good you've actually been pushing this agenda as well. And it'll be very interesting to see as Chris talks, and I hope Chris is back online.
Yes, I'm back online. Yeah.
Between what Allianz is doing as well as what Ayala is doing as well. So Chris, I think I hear you very well. I hope it's good now. So we'll just let you continue where you left off.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. And thanks for Vicky for stepping in. Please let me know if there's more problems with the connection. So what we are doing in the department is again related to our strategy. So really working with the policy framework, working with the underwriting due diligence, which is crucial to identify risks within our industry, providing in-depth ESG assessments, also working with clearly defined exclusion criteria when it comes to coal, but also with controversial weapons, for example, having risk dialogues with clients, I already mentioned that, and last but not least, also working with products and services internally and externally. So how does that work for an insurer in practice? Well, we got the basics right, so to say. We joined the Principles for Sustainable Insurance. There's a ESG board set up, which defines the strategy. We as a center of competence have been established, as I said, 6 years ago. And the process this had been established within the global governance framework means that the underwriting due diligence starts with the underwriter, goes to an assessment to us if necessary, a decision follows, and this is basically the cycle starts again in the next year maybe, or there's a certain decision passed on to the underwriter that he follows up. So to make this a bit more tangible, a case study, a tale of two hydro dams, just to show you a bit how this works. Hydroelectric power is a very interesting case because on the one side, it's a renewable power source. At the same time, it can have considerable negative environmental and social impacts. It's often related to indigenous communities, biodiversity, these typical risks. Resettlement is a topic. So let's have a look at that. We picked two anonymized examples, Dam A and Dam B, one in Brazil, one in Laos. Both are operational. The Brazilian dam receives a high level of NGO and media criticism, while the Laos dam a low level of media and NGO criticism. But how does it look in practice? How does this ESG risk profile look in practice? First of all, you see with Dam A that there is a downstream flooding, which might be related to the dam or to weather-related factors. That's not clear. You see with the other dam, there's a detailed environmental management plan, including a water quality monitoring plan. So looks, let's say, very good. On the next aspect, biodiversity, Dam A has some allegations on fish passage technicalities. Despite there's a fish ladder and monitoring systems, it doesn't seem to work properly. Dam B has not really, with Dam B, biodiversity has not really suffered from the dam's reservoir. There's ecotourism at the site, so that's considerably better. When you look at health and safety, Dam B shows no risks, while with Dam A, there's large-scale strikes and vandalism due to below average working conditions. Even the military was involved. So you see Dam A is much more critical. Again, this is real, anonymized real life examples. This is what you can come across. When it comes to protected sites, there's a forest, nevertheless, the deforestation was relatively small with Dam A, so that's manageable. There's a national park nearby with Dam B, but adequately managed. So also that is good news. When it comes to resettlement, large resettlement, there was some local conflict still, although it was overly well managed. With Dam B, there was a detailed resettlement and social action plan. So you could say almost best practice. And last but not least, the G, corruption. Dam A exposed to bid rigging, bribery and kickback schemes that are currently investigated or were investigated at the time. And at the same time, Dam B, allegations of corruption, but could not be proven. Now you see there's a really different risk profile, ESG risk profile of these two dams. And you see the real critical points with Dam A highlighted here. For us, that would be a potential group escalation, meaning we really need to see if this is a business case for us. And while Dam B might be sign off, right? And from the onset, you see both dams have some kind of criticism. Both are in countries where you could see these projects maybe going wrong. But in the end, two very different profiles. And that's why you need to understand it. And that's how this ESG can really navigate you aside from media, and stakeholder perceptions can guide you through this topic. I hope that shed a bit of practical light on how this looks in practice. Last but not least, ESG is a value proposition. I think there's two topics which I want to explore. One is the internal value proposition, the relevance of ESG for the management of insurance risks. We have seen that there is quite some, let's say, research out there that indicates that good ESG risks are good investment risks. There's literally no comparable research on the insurance side. And so what we did is we conducted such a research, and our study, The Predictive Power of ESG for Insurance, revealed that there is evidence that also in insurance, ESG is a related proxy for a good risk. So that was very interesting for us. And also the second point was that we really could identify parameters that could help us identify risk ex ante. So meaning that they were could be predictor going forward to identify insurance risks. Now that's really interesting because you now go into the financial business case of insurance. So we are currently working with a pilot with a line of business to see how this could work in the pricing models. But it shows you the power of ESG. If you truly understand the topic, you can actually also do better business in the long run. And for us, this means better pricing of insurances, or more appropriate pricing, so to say, because the risks were already there. We just didn't have the right indicators for that. And that's a very, let's say, internal value proposition. At the same time, there's also an external value proposition because the, let's say, analytics we run internally on companies and projects, we of course can also run externally. Also, it might not look exactly the same. So on the one side, we are doing thought leadership. We publish ESG risk briefings. You can see it here on the bottom left. And we are also offering services such as assessments, materiality analysis on let's say client profiles. This can of course already also be about peers and along with recommendations to what to improve. If you look at peers, also can be about third parties. And last but not least, if there's any focus on policies on internal governance structures, that's also something where we can have a look. For us, this is really mirroring the expertise we have internally and also in this case externally. And yeah, with that, despite the interruption, I think I stayed relatively well within my time and would open the floor for Q&A.
Okay, thank you, Chris, for that. And I think, yes, you are well within the time limit and we're catching up. I think I have some questions here, so I will be reading one of them. One is from Steve. Chris, you have given us a great example of the two dams. where is the failures in ESG are obvious, it can be relatively easy to spot. But what can be done? But what can be done by Allianz and others to get under the surface when a lot has been spent on marketing cover up or greenwashing the risk?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question. I would say you need a very thorough assessment. So what we are doing is we are investing in ESG data. So we don't own. So it's very important not only to rely on the company information, because you can end up with greenwashing. It's exactly true. So we're trying to invest heavily in third-party data. We're, if necessary, also invest in own research about a risk, and that's the only way you can basically counter that. Because it is, I think it's a very good question, because it's a very viable problem that you will meet in practice. Yeah.
Okay, I think just a follow-up on that question, Chris, because you mentioned that you do a lot of research and you actually use other third-party suppliers or third-party data suppliers. So what kind of data suppliers are you dealing with? Is this the like of MSCI, etc.? Just
Yes. So not all our partnerships are public, but for example, yes, we partner with MSCI. That's something I think we've been public about because they accompany us now for many years and do so in different segments. I have to say that we use very specialized providers. So for example, for controversial weapons, we use a specialized provider from Scandinavia, who is very good in that. Now at the moment, we're looking a lot at carbon data. You are dealing with different players here, I would say. So very specialized players that work on the carbon data piece. So I would say when it comes to ESG data in general, MSCI is the biggest partner. But we are also partnering, and I would say that only got more over the years with specialized providers on special issues, or specific issues,
I think there's another question related to that third-party rating. So in dealing with potential clients, how do you use the third-party ESG ratings in underwriting their insurance requirements? This is from Raul.
So the question is, how do we work with third-party providers?
No, how do you use the third-party ESG ratings in underwriting their insurance requirements? I guess, do you use MSCI ratings as a proxy to the ESG ratings, or aside from that, you also do your own ESG ratings before you proceed with the underwriting?
Thanks for the clarification, Vicky. No, it is we always use it only as input information, the external data, because we want to make up our own mind. So the more critical the profile, the more we do manual checks on the input we get. We always do manual checks, and they get more extensive the more critical the case is, and the more critical potentially also our decision is, right?
Right.
So never use it one-to-one, no.
Yeah, I think Raul, if I can share, as I mentioned in the beginning of this session, Ayala Corporation received an ESG rating report from Allianz. I was surprised because I thought it was only MSCI or the likes of Sustainalytics who was doing the report. But when we were doing our usual roadshow or stewardship meeting with our insurers, they handed me the report. And I think, as what Chris mentioned, the MSCI or the other third-party ESG ratings is just an input. They also do an extensive research on your ESG practices and other issues, and then they can provide the underwriting requirements. Then I can attest to that process because they have shown it to me and they have explained it to me, and I have received the report. I hope that clarifies. Again, there's another question from Steve. Several insurers have reshaped their portfolios to cut out poor risks like coal, for example. But what are you doing at the same time to encourage improvements from customers, particularly where there are many players in Asia who would like to do better but can't improve overnight? And I agree with this one because improvement will not be done overnight, but there should always be a roadmap towards this. If you can answer the question, Chris, or do you need clarification?
Sure. So, I mean, the action on coal is a phase out, so it's not an action overnight. So what we do in Allianz is we basically orient ourselves on there's scenarios for the 1.5 degree target with percentages. So we orient towards these percentages that are scientifically based. So that is at the moment 30% threshold, and in the future goes down, right, to 25%, and then down to basically 0% in 2040, or around 30%, around 0% in 2040. So first of all, I think it's not cutting out overnight, but it's really phasing out. And at the same time, what we're trying to phase in is that we try to phase in, of course, renewables. So we try to support here, we try to support with insurance solutions, we try to support with investments. So I think these two things are intertwined. I can totally understand that this is not something that can be achieved overnight. So it really is about, let's say, on the one side, trying to get rid of one thing and at the same time trying to triangulate the other.
Yeah, I think what you have just mentioned is that there is no abrupt decision not to insure coal. What you are saying is that there is a phasing out timeline when you will say no to coal 100%. And I think that's
correct.
Fair enough, right? That's fair enough because it's difficult also, and it's the investment to have a coal plant is also very expensive. It is not cheap, so we have to recoup some investment. And I think for Philippines, where we still need a base load coming from coal, we still need that. And it's good to know that you don't have an abrupt timeline, you don't have an abrupt decision, but there is that phasing out timeline. For all the risk officers from the Philippines, I hope you heard that because it will help us in our insurance requirements. Okay, there's another one here. I think this is also from Steve. Okay, if risk managers wanted to learn more about the latest best practice for ESG and insurance, can you recommend good courses that risk managers might be able to access?
That's a good question. Not from the top of my head, to be honest. I have to say. There is an increasing offer in courses on ESG. I honestly, when I went into the area 10 years ago, there was very little. Now I think there is a lot out there. I can certainly have a look at that and maybe provide some input. I can see what I can do. Certainly.
Okay, good. And then I think this one is related to what's happening right now. I think the COVID-19 pandemic has raised fundamental questions about the nature of the capitalist system. The ESG issues had increasingly been coming onto the corporate radar, but this pandemic has shown how a health and environmental issue can become a profound social problem and cause material governance challenges. It also highlights that such issues do not respect national borders. So my question to you now, what is now the importance of ESG in the ongoing and post-COVID pandemic scenarios?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think ESG is all about non-financial resilience. That's really what it is about. It is not about that you have enough money at the bank, at the company, or are able to get so and so many credits as such. But it really is about non-financial resilience and on environmental topics, social topics, governance topics. And then I think the pandemic shows that as a company, and there's also actually been already research in this relatively young crisis by MSCI, they scrutinized their data, and they said actually that companies that, from an investment point of view again, that companies doing well on ESG.
Sorry, that's my phone.
Hello. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks. So so the research from MSCI indicated that there's really a correlation between the two, between doing relatively well in the pandemic and being, let's say, good on ESG. Because I think ESG, being good on ESG, often means that you're good at managing your resilience, right? And in chartering your risks, managing your risks, identifying risks. That's the essence. So I'm not surprised. So in that sense, I think you might be rewarded now when you invested in ESG. At the same time, I think it also illustrated that, you know, it really, because we always talk about climate change and it seems so far away. And of course, there's, let's say, situations in Australia, maybe with the bushfires and alike, where people say, well, you see already this coming to life, right? Or in Germany, where we basically have our 3rd year of a drought. There's rivers like the Rhine, which you can't ship anymore at certain times, which is unprecedented. So you already see effects, but it still doesn't feel like. So I think also people now feel that there is really non-financial risks out there, right? We had a financial crisis 10 years ago. Now we have a non-financial crisis, which hits us even harder because you cannot just simply print more money. So I think in that sense, it also showed us like what really a non-financial crisis looks like. At a global level, as you said, Vicky, Renault doesn't look at national borders, doesn't care about central banks. I think one limitation, of course, is that at the same time, of course, the virus has something of natural catastrophe in a certain respect. So there is a geographical and sectoral element to it, which, let's say, doesn't really care about how resilient you are. And just to give you an example, if you are now, let's say, a sustainable airline or not, if you have a good MSCI rating or not, at the moment, it maybe doesn't matter too much, right? Because your segment is very much under, let's say, under pressure. So in that sense, there's limitations to ESG because it has this kind of natural catastrophe element, as every earthquake, as every hurricane. And again, you might be more resilient to respond to it. But of course, there is this geographical, political response to it, and also these kind of implications that in some respects also, let's say, go far beyond what ESG can manage. There, I think we also have to be realistic. But overall, I think it's a very interesting development.
Right. Thank you for that. And I think you mentioned something about ESG being related to non-financial resiliency. And my take on that is that you have to have both resiliencies in place, because otherwise you will not be a sustainable organization. The non-financial risk can turn into a financial risk, as we are seeing right now with this COVID pandemic, right?
Yes.
These humanitarian issues has deep and great economic consequences. So I think what I can say to everyone out there is, let's start looking into the ESG risk and opportunities of our own companies, and talk to the insurers. They have a way of helping us to mitigate our ESG risk and to explore our ESG opportunities as well. I think those are. One last question, because I think we are already on 4:43 mark. If there is any last one question, otherwise I will be the one to do it. Okay, I don't see anything. So probably this one, last one, for Chris. As I mentioned a while ago, the ESG risk dialogue will help mitigate risk for the financial sector and for the industry. Can you give an example on that?
Yes. So I give you a very, let's say, a very personal example in that sense that I worked on this myself for like 2 to 3 years within Allianz when I started. And it actually, so it was a client in the oil and gas space, and very, very controversial, I can tell you. I actually knew the client from my previous job. And when I started with Allianz, they told me we need a risk dialogue here. This is we don't know how a risk dialogue actually looks like for insurance, but we need one because this is a big relationship here, a big client at stake, and we just need transparency in what's going on. And this accompanied us, as I said, for 2 to 3 years. We were really like bouncing back and forth data and actually tried to get an understanding. We in the end also sent engineers out that did technical checks to amend what we did. We met at the we met at the headquarter. We talked, and in the end, it was very funny. After 2 years, despite all the allegations, despite all the criticism and controversies, the client was actually much better than anticipated. And that also changed the business case, because suddenly we were even able to do more business because the risk quality was much better. So also here you see how a risk can become an opportunity. And also for me personally, it was a very rewarding experience. And if it would be if we would have found something very different, then also, but at least it gives you information, it gives you transparency, and it allows informed decision making, and that's important.
Yeah, I agree on that one. Yes. So thank you, Chris, for answering all the questions right now. And I think I turn you now over to Stacy. Stacy?
Yes, so thank you very much. We've come to the end of our Prima Huddle. It's 45 minutes. And it's really great to hear. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties that we had previously, but hopefully we all got to hear about Ayala's Ayala's journey as well. And Vic, it will be also interesting to hear about your journey in terms of getting this started, because we know that it hasn't been easy for you, and even till today you are also still. It's also been a challenge of integrating this and making sure it's in the top kind of concern in your board. And so it'll be interesting, Vicky, if we can also hear more from you. I'm not sure we have enough time, but maybe in 1 minute, maybe you can say something about that.
Okay, so I think we realized that sustainability, risk management, and governance are functional disciplines that we can all integrate, because it created the value for the whole organization. So right now, we started a conversation in 2018. How do you actually operationalize that? So we are increasingly including ESG risk in our annual risk assessment, and we also have included environmental impact in our risk criteria. And the best for you to see or to use to really integrate ESG into your processes is adopt TCFD, that Task Force on Climate Financial Related Disclosures recommendations, and it will really help you understand why do we need to integrate ESG risk into our risk assessment and into our strategy. I think that's my 1 minute.
Thanks, Vicky. Thanks very much. It'll be interesting to see the assessment one day. So, once again, thank you very much to both Chris and Vicky for sharing their experience, their cases, and their stories in this. We have come to the end of our session. So, but as we all know, with Prima Huddles, we would like to get your feedback. So, I think a poll is being sent out on the chat. If you can just answer that one question before you exit out, that would be great. And just to let everyone know what's coming up from every Monday onwards and more, we also do have a cyber session next week on Monday, and then on next week we also have a webinar on macroeconomics and financial markets, and the following week is also talking about captives and sustainable financing in this time. So if you're interested, please go to our website, check it out, and sign up. And we look forward to hearing from you. And if that's really all for us today, we're looking forward to as we start the week ahead. I wish everyone be safe, stay healthy, and see you all next week, hopefully. So thanks everyone. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.